Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 6, Episode 46 of our weekly P&Q&C&A&T videos. And right off at the top, I'd like to mention this channel has been a little bit closer to a one-man operation in recent days, including last week where we actually skipped the P&Q&C&A&T videos, and that's totally on me. It's right in the middle of my exam season, and we're just coming up on the end of it now. My last exam is on the 19th, so last week, instead of creating content, I was studying content.
I think that's definitely a much better investment of your time when you think about what your education is going to mean to you.
Than the ad revenue we missed out on that week. Yeah, it was probably a safe investment, but just for the purposes of accountability, if anybody's wondering whose fault it is that there was no video last week, it's mine, or I guess if you want to be mad, my professors, if you want to diffuse responsibility a little bit.
The payoff was good. I think you did pretty well, right? Or you think you did? You told me you think you did pretty well.
I do believe I did pretty well, but we'll have to see. Only time will tell.
And technically, we still had content because I was able to put up a gameplay video in place of it, so it was still something. True. Just no podcast like we normally like to do.
Yeah, and getting into it before I get to the questions. P&Q&C&A&T. For anybody who doesn't know, P is for podcast. If you're watching this in the video format, you can check out the links in the description to watch this on all the podcasting platforms. We do occasionally make reference to the video, but it doesn't take away that much from the experience. And podcasts are my preferred audio listening experience.
Right.
Q is for questions. C is for comments, because people don't always ask questions, but sometimes we still talk about stuff that people say anyways. A is for answers, because when somebody asks a question, usually we answer it. And T is for talking, because we started adding letters and we decided not to stop, and so we pretty much, with the Q and C and A and T, we've exhausted all possible sort of.
I think P was our last edition.
P was our most recent edition, yeah. Because we thought there was no more letters to add, and then we
realized
this up in podcast format.
Yeah, there was something.
We managed it anyways. Life finds a way. So our first question this week, and because we missed a week, some of these, are a little bit
older. They've been older within the last couple weeks at least.
Yeah. The first one comes from Apocalypse, and they say, going off the professors charging students for syllabuses. There is a story going around at the university I'm attending that one of the professors is teaching a course in which one of the required materials is a book that they wrote. Students taking the course are required to have the most up-to-date of said book, which releases either once or twice a year. Since I haven't had this professor, I can't confirm the validity of this story, but it would be awfully scummy if the book was just rehashed to make the students buy it.
So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about here.
Yeah.
The first is, I guess it would be at least some value if they rehashed it. What I really hate is when they don't even do that. Like maybe they change the font, something really superficial.
Or they'll change the order so that the chapters release in different order, or they'll change the practice questions so that the study guide will be useless.
Right.
Or they'll do something about it so that it's basically the same content, but you need to rebuy the book so you can't purchase them used.
So what's interesting to me, and this is maybe the perspective of age, is that it took me a long time to figure this out, that the people in positions of authority are still people.
Yeah.
Right? That just because they happen to have power over you, just because they happen to have a lot of respect in society, doesn't actually make them better people. We knew a lot of not so great people when we were growing up, and some of them end up being not so great people when we're older. And I wish that if it works both ways, that when we see professors, for example, as instead of just these sort of super smart people, that they're actually people too. They have their own foibles, they have their own flaws, and they don't need just our respect, but they can benefit from being given the benefit of the doubt sometimes as human beings, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is, and this is a scenario where the opposite is true. So the people who actually have the experience to know better, professors, should think about what it was like as a student on a limited budget, and instead of seeing students as a source of income to take advantage of, that they could understand, well, maybe instead of screwing over students like I was screwed over when I was a student, and having to pay for all the stuff that was really expensive, maybe not do that.
Yeah.
I don't really know how else to put it. It just seems like a particularly scummy thing to do, because every professor was at some point a university student.
They had to be, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because, textbooks are useful to varying degrees, right?
Right.
So, and I think professors do get some kickback from the textbook sales. I don't know exactly how that works anyways, even if it's not their own book.
You think so? I think it's only if it's their own book that happens.
So then what's the advantage of the textbook?
Well, the textbook is the sort of a resource and the basis so that people don't always have to rely entirely on the lecture, right?
But they often integrate like the Pearson where you need the codes, right? And that's how they make it so that you either have to buy the codes directly from the bookstore or you have to buy the textbook, and they're integrated in the course. And I can't imagine that it would be so ubiquitous if either the university or the professor didn't get it. Like, I know for one of my classes last year, they would literally have a Pearson rep come in a couple of days to do tech support for the online stuff that was for like 5 or 10% of your grade.
Oh, but I bet, listen, even if the lecturer doesn't benefit from it, there's a possibility there's some kickback for the department head.
Yeah. So there's a kickback for somebody.
Again, yeah. So there's, whether it's actually, the worst would be if they were getting something back, if it was money.
Yeah.
The best would be if it was just convenient. So that they were, so that they were just doing it for the sake of integrating everything and making it easier to, I don't know, troubleshoot, to make it easier. If there was some potentially altruistic motive, and they just happen to get it a little bit wrong.
I don't think there is, though, because the thing is, I know that for the time where the Pearson person came in a couple times for support, my professor seemed to be getting a lot of students asking for basically tech support on it, and I had to say a bunch of times, go up to the front of the room and go, if you're having trouble with this, I can't help you. I'm just Marco. I'm not Pearson. So I don't know how to fix this, was his sort of catchphrase. And it was sort of frustrating for everybody involved, right? Because, he doesn't know how to troubleshoot it, but at the same time, he's a professor, right? We're contacting sort of the people responsible for our class for something that is responsible for a mark in our class, right? It was like, I think it was 5%, it might have been 10%, right? And so to contact the people who said, you need this, go buy this and use this service, and us saying it doesn't work, and them saying, I don't know how to use it, right?
Yeah, I think
is sort of, that doesn't help anybody.
If you're going to be decent and you're in a position of power authority, you have an obligation when you, in that specific scenario, your answer really should be, okay, I don't know what's going on. Let me talk to them, and I will get back to you about how to do it. Take some ownership of the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was, and I think to different extents, there are definitely professors who end up doing a lot of money-centric stuff. Like, I had a professor first year that I have some actual sort of funny stories about, but he's very sort of tech and tool-oriented. He was a psych professor, but designed a bunch of tools that have been rolled out across my university on every campus, and also rolled out across, I think, province-wide.
Right.
Like, he's partnered with different sort of people, and he often uses his early psych classes as sort of a testing ground for stuff as it comes out.
Like experiments, lab rats.
Yeah. So he ended up, for one of the things he did, it was basically an online essay writing thing where you would write and submit essays through this portal, and then there was a phase in the middle where your peers would give you feedback,
right,
and comments, and then give you sort of a grading system, and then you would get the comments and have a chance to revise, and then you'd resubmit it and would be marked by a TA.
So that sounds like it's potentially useful.
No, and in that format it was useful. The problem is the feedback that you get from your peers is often sort of crappy, because people will just, like, everybody's a critic, sort of thing, where you would get like really atrocious ratings from your peers, and then you would get like a great mark from the TA, right? Even if you didn't incorporate any of their advice, or you would get really great stuff from the peers and you'd get absolutely no advice on how to fix anything, right?
Okay.
So you'd have both ends of the spectrum at once, and one of those people is wrong. The person that just says good and has no feedback for you, and the person that says this is garbage, burn it to the ground and start over again, also,
right. Right, when it's nothing, it's like a lot of other things, whether it's compliments. When somebody gives you a compliment and it's generic, it's meaningless. When they're very specific about what they like or what they appreciate, that's really meaningful. And so what was you were starting with the story about how he set up the system?
I'm starting the story with how he set up. Yeah, and so we had that, and in that format, it's fine because your peers marking and comments are sort of garbage, but it doesn't matter because it gets marked by the TAs. But in earlier years, when the system first got rolled out, it was actually the mark that the other students gave you that ended up being your mark for that. So it was marked by your peers, and they would average out.
Okay, but your peers don't have. I mean, they're learning too. They do not necessarily have the critical skills to be able to analyze things properly.
They would give you a rubric to mark it with, and there's a couple problems with that. There was one problem in which you could just get sort of a peer giving you a bad mark and bringing down your average because they were a little inept. Right? You could get the thing where people give you a bad mark, right, and then the TA gives you a good mark, and that sort of underscores the idea that when you're marked by your peers, it's not super consistent.
Right.
And the other issue with that is that they are doing the work of a TA. They are providing marking for the course, right, without being paid for the course. In fact, they're paying for it. And for the second reason, the first reason was why everybody hated it, but the second reason was why he lost a class action lawsuit where all the people who participated in using the software before the marks were from the TA, he lost a class action lawsuit for like $400,000, where everybody who was participated in it got had to be reimbursed for the time they spent marking. I think it was up to like 2 hours worth or something.
Yeah.
Because they could track how long you had been signed in for on the software during that phase.
Right.
And with it open, and they were paid like $44 an hour or something for their time retroactively. Yeah. So that was a lawsuit for almost $500,000 that he lost because of that. And another thing, something that happened in the year that I was in his class, is he accidentally showed an entire class full, like a 500-seat class, interracial porn by accident. And I mean, the interracial part isn't specifically relevant information.
But it's a specific fetish.
It's just, I mean, it's just extra flavor. He is white, and his wife is also very Caucasian. It was an unfortunate mistake. He liked to play music before classes.
Right.
And so he would play it off his laptop, and he would try to play something relevant. So he came in a little bit late this class day, opened up his laptop, it was all plugged in and whatever, and he signed in, and it was just... Yeah, okay. He had left it open on his work computer, which is not...
This is a good example,
ideal.
I think, of what I was saying earlier about how... Listen, he's a human being.
Yeah.
He made a mistake. It's gotta be not the greatest environment for anybody who's sitting in that class who's watching porn, and I can't forgive it, but he clearly made a mistake.
Yeah.
I think, though, that there still needs to be consequences, the same way that he made a mistake, say, with the software and the students and stuff.
And got sued. Yeah, I don't know if there were any consequences. I don't believe there were any sort of visible consequences to the thing that happened in our year. And honestly, he was a relatively engaging professor. I didn't have any issues with him as a prof. It's just there's a certain vibe to him when you collect the stories and sort of stack them up next to each other. But so he seems like a decent enough dude. He was sociable, pretty nice, but
so I think, man, that's so complicated, because I think one of the difficulties with porn is that what it does is a lot of it will objectify women.
Yeah.
And unless, I mean, I wasn't there, clearly, I'm not a particular connoisseur, but I'd imagine that if that was the typical kind of porn, then there would be a lot of students in that class who would feel very uncomfortable.
There's a lot of issues with it too. there's issues on a couple different levels with that, and that was it was an honest mistake, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And with the the learning system with the class action lawsuit, that also appears to me as on some level not recognizing what he's doing is wrong.
Right.
But that seems like a more intentional way of basically being able to conserve TA marking hours.
That other example seems more thought through, like it's potentially exploitative, because
he knew what he was doing. I just don't know if the perception of what he was doing was wrong, and it likely wasn't for him to implement something like that.
And he would have but he would have benefited a lot from thinking about students and TAs.
Yeah.
Thinking about them from their perspective.
Yeah.
If he'd recognize that, he'd realize, they're basically doing TA's work,
Yeah.
and they're not getting paid for it.
And also, I can't trust their quality of marking. Because the problem is when you're, assessing somebody else's stuff with comments, right?
Right.
That's not actually, like, I would get, for when I was working on this, a lot of pieces of writing that were very obviously low effort and very low quality that I had to review. And I would also get a lot of comments that were also very low effort and very low quality. Yeah. So, because it was supposed to be a pretty easy course. So a bunch of people who were taking it put in, like, no time and effort. They cheated on the online tests.
Right.
They just took somebody else's notes to study for the final. They didn't do any of the reading, sort of stuff like that. So you get people who come into it expecting it's an easy course, right? And I don't want to say anything about their capabilities or their situation, right? Because it's entirely possible that they're taking this because, it's the way for them to have this many courses while still being able to manage it, right? If all they need to do is pass, then, if they're doing what they need to do to pass, right? Even for the sort of, I don't want to make a value judgment on them cheating on the online quizzes because it's
structured from what you're describing. It was structured in a way that it almost encouraged cheating.
It was structured in a way that it was incredibly easy to cheat because everybody was getting the same questions just in a different order.
Right.
So I didn't ever personally cheat, but I'm not making a value judgment on anybody else who did because, again, I just don't know their situation, right?
Right.
So it's not that, like, I'm saying that everybody was dumb in this class. I'm just saying that there was good evidence that a huge number of people were putting in very little or no effort.
Right.
And when those are the people that are marking you instead of TAs who have accountability and who are being, paid by the department, and there's sort of meaningful consequences of them doing a crappy job. Yeah. And you can also appeal to a TA and talk to them. When you're just getting marked by 5 random people and it's the average of their marks, you don't get to say, I don't think this was marked fairly. I'm going to ask for a remark.
So here's the thing too, right? When they do delegate so much of the work, the ability to have any kind of meaningful oversight just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to be able to go back to the work that other students are doing, evaluating you, and being able to point out that they didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is, it seems like when you mentioned that the TAs are doing it and they come at it from different angles, there's a huge potential conflict of interest and the possibility of secondary gain for fellow students marking each other.
Yeah.
You give everybody else really crappy marks. If there's any kind of grading curve involved, what you've done is you've improved your own chances by making sure everybody else does really poorly.
That's true.
Or if your social capital matters to you, then you would have a lot of difficulty judging accurately when somebody does a bad job because you'd be afraid that there might be some retaliation.
Yeah, to be fair, you were providing comments for, like, I think 5 other people.
Yeah.
And the class was like 1.5 thousand. So the dent that you're making is not a large one, but you totally have the sort of a bunch of conflicting interests that make it a not great system. But, that's I think that's probably the single most maybe interesting professor I've had so far in my university career.
Nice.
Yeah. So there we go. That's a sort of long way to go from just the books, but
because I think that was tied into something that we commented before, right? Like in the last Q&C&A&T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about textbooks and people who own the books. I think you said it was a good thing when somebody had written textbook.
I think it was that I was talking about the cost that depending on whether the information is good.
Yeah.
But if they were printing up the syllabus as a benefit to students and charging only for the cost of printing, that was okay.
Yeah, and now it's not as justified when there's other ways of accessing it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there we go. Our next question comes from Lucrative Duck, and they say, what nth metal pack do you guys recommend?
So this was a question from a long time ago, and we saw the follow-up comments, and the answers were pretty much there. I think if we had to summarize, the 400 is the highest likelihood of metals. 800 is a little bit worse, but has better gears and better non-metal cards if you don't happen to get a metal.
Yeah.
But 200 is the best if you're aiming just for metals, and you're willing to spend a lot of time and use the airplane mode /refund glitch, and we'll link it in the description and in the eye in the top right corner. But it's probably a function of how long we've played, I think. But the time it takes to exploit the 200 nth metal pack to get a metal character it doesn't seem like it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a chance to make 40 nth metal each time when you buy a 200 pack and sell it back for 240.
Yeah.
But a 12% total chance. So 2% each of 6 characters, 12%. So there's basically an 88% chance that you're not going to get it each time. That doesn't seem like it's worth it to us.
And you also have to, if you're using it to get the extra 40th medal, you have to do it and successfully use the reset until you get a medal 6 times, right? 5 times to get the medal for the one 200 pack. And then you have to do it again until you actually get the medal card from it.
Yeah.
So you essentially have to do 6 cycles with a 12% chance of each cycle happening on any given pull, right? Just to get 1 free medal card, which is not a lot. And that's to get 1 free random medal card, right? If you're looking for only a specific one, then your odds drop drastically.
Right, so it makes sense. I mean, if you're early enough in the game and you need a really strong card to get a decent level for grinding power credits, it might be worth it to get your first medal. Mm-hmm. But not for us. I mean, and the other thing about medals is there's sort of a funky sweet spot, right? Like, I think because it's still, I mean, they start off needing 44 copies, now it's down to 25, but you still need 25 copies of medals to get them to full Elite 7.
Yeah.
So there's a sweet spot of Elite 3 that takes 7 copies to get there, because at Elite 3 you can improve their passive, and the stats make them competitive with most other golds at, say, E5 or even up to E7.
Yeah.
So that maybe changes the calculus for that, and it might be worth it if that's all you're looking for. But typically I think the 400 is the best, and if you're late enough in the game, 800 isn't much worse, and getting better gears probably makes up for it.
Yeah, so it really depends on what you're going for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there we go. Our next question comes from Ostreef, or I'm not sure how that's pronounced actually. Ostreaf.
So it sounds, the EAF is like a leaf.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like osteopath? Like
so does Ostreef sound about right?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And they say, have you ever hacked before? And then in brackets, added power credits, energy, etc.
So there's an interesting distinction to be made, I think, right, in terms of the language that people use. So we've talked about this, like hacking is sort of a blanket term that people use for
modifying game data.
Right. But there's a subset of hacking that seems maybe it gets a little bit less, what I don't want to say respect. There's a word I'm looking for. It's
has less cachet, maybe.
That's it. So it's got less prestige.
Yeah.
We're talking about I can't even remember.
Script kidding?
Script kidding, where, I mean, the simplest form of it is using software that lets you make purchases without spending real money.
Yeah.
And so you're increasing specific, I guess, currencies in the game.
Yeah. So I guess the long and the short of it is we don't hack, and we don't recommend hacking on main accounts, and we say that with sort of an asterisk because we have previously used hacked accounts to demonstrate content in offline mode. So when new characters would come out, before they were available in challenges, we would have somebody provide us with a hacked account with the characters in it so we could showcase them. So
for people who've only started playing the game in the last year, we should probably explain how that works, because when a new update would come, which it hasn't come for, has it been a year? It's probably been more than a year now.
It's been a long time.
More than a year. So when new content comes out, they release it, but then it comes out in dribs and drabs. So there'd
be like a handful of new characters, some new gear, different stuff, and they would all be in different places. So some would be an online multiplayer exclusive.
So you have to wait a few weeks for that season.
Yeah, some would be challenges.
So you have to wait a few weeks for those seasons.
Yeah, and then Survivor, I think, is the only other place that you can get exclusive content. Survivor, or then sometimes packs too.
Sometimes they would have packs, and they would add. I remember when Killer Croc came out, his gear ended up being added to the gear locker.
Yeah, and so for any of those, there would be a sort of timer before you could even get to look at them. And then after that, if they were, for example, online multiplayer, there would be a certain amount of time before you'd be able to see them at Elite 7 or maxed out at any meaningful capacity. So you wouldn't be able to see them in their sort of full glory.
Right. So, I mean, if you want to look on our channel, we have a bunch of videos. We label them sneak previews.
Yeah.
And
has it been a year since the last metal character was introduced? I don't think so.
Oh, that's true. I was thinking of the significant,
because
you're right.
we still did that not too long ago. I don't know when that was with the new metal characters.
So maybe it was just earlier this year. It just feels like the year's coming to an end.
It's definitely been less than a year.
Okay.
Less than a full year. Because I was trying to think about major stuff, but it's weird because metal characters just don't feel fresh anymore. So
And I guess in my mind, it didn't feel like something that was really added. Like, it didn't add anything significant only because the hackers all got the medals really quickly.
yeah,
And if you're playing legitimately, you're working with characters that don't really have an impact in multiplayer until maybe in the last few months.
yeah,
It's like bronzes now.
mm-hmm.
I don't play bronzes very much in multiplayer.
yeah.
They're really just for challenges, which is a shame.
Yeah, but there is a new sort of, not game mode, but new set of like missions and stuff with Phantom Zone, which is not, not bad for longevity, I think.
That's true. And I think that, yeah, you're right. No, because Phantom Zone is relatively recent. It's only really been in this year. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's got to be. I don't know why I'm losing perspective. It feels like it's been so long.
Yeah, I have
been
no
a year.
concept of time anymore. So that when you said a year, it didn't initially twig anything for me. But then I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm not sure that's right.
It just feels like it. It's like when you've been. I'm trying to think of an analogy that's not offensive, and I can't. So I'll just skip right past that.
All right, fair enough. So there we go. So yeah, we've used that hacked content. But on your main account, you definitely run a risk of being banned. There was somebody in our comments recently who had their account banned after a hacker.
Yeah.
And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I think, in our Q&A.
So the really big issue, I think, with hacking is that either you do it yourself or somebody else does it for you.
Yeah. And if you do it yourself, you have to trust yourself enough. And if somebody else does it for you, you have to trust them enough. And both of those are a little bit daunting when you start out not knowing what you're doing. And I think it's possible that some people might get to a point where they feel comfortable hacking their own account.
Yeah.
But if you're starting out, there's a good chance that you'll screw up and get yourself banned. And don't do that on your main account if you're going to do it at all. The one thing that hacking, I think, is bad in games. We've mentioned this, but this has probably been more than a year ago since we've shared a sort of unified theory of why hacking is bad. Where hacking is bad in games when you can take away the fun for other people.
Right.
So in a single player game, I literally don't care. The only time hacking is bad is when you can take away the fun for other people. So that's if you cheat for a speed run, for example, or do something else like that. If you're going to hack the game and then brag about how well you're doing, right? So as soon as you bring other people into the mix that could be negatively affected, that's when it's not a good thing to do anymore.
Right.
But if it's a single player game and you sort of are not putting the hacked version's content out into the world in any way that is negatively affecting others, right? Then I couldn't care less. And the good thing about Injustice is that for the sort of live play component of it, you're not playing against any real people. So the only issue that you run into is when you put teams on with hacked content that is something that makes things more challenging. So if you were to hack in Astro Harness and put that on a team member in online play, I think that would make things less fun for other people because Astro Harness slows down the game. It makes things suck. If you give yourself characters at a level that you can't get naturally in the game and put it on for other people, that makes things less fun for other people. Right? So if you're hacking and you're just leaving sort of the average team in defensively, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to make any moral sort of comment, right? Because you're not negatively affecting anybody else's experience of play. The maybe worst thing that you're doing is getting to a place that would take other people more work. And so one could argue that it's devaluing sort of the real work people have to do to get to a point. But I would argue that in a game with an economy where you can buy in-game currency anyways and all that stuff, it doesn't matter enough to sort of be negatively impacting anybody in any threshold way, in any way that you could actually notice.
So if we're going to be talking about things that we haven't talked about in a long time, one of the other things related to this that I think I haven't gone on about for a while too is that the problem with, if we separate different kinds of cheating, so hacking for sure, because it's going into the game and essentially breaking something or manipulating something where the developers either didn't intend it or didn't make it so that it should have been something that was easily done. If we're talking about the glitches, where it's just almost in some ways a random sequence of events to reproduce it, I think there's an issue of fairness where if some people have this knowledge and the ability to do this and some people don't, then you're basically leaving people to become or take away their, like, how did you put it? Take away their enjoyment from the game?
Yeah, to negatively impact somebody else's game experience.
So that was my motivation originally when we discovered glitches. In a lot of ways, for me, it was leveling the playing field.
Yeah, if you tell everybody about it, everybody's in the same boat. Nobody has any specific advantage over other people unless people are making the choice not to use glitches, which is, again, fair, right?
Yeah.
People can make any choice that they want and stuff like this. And I feel like in the case of glitches, I can even understand where people come from, where they get a little bit of that sense of sort of devaluing their own effort, right? When they see other people doing something that they are not willing to do themselves, that is making the game easier for them and they won't on principle. I understand why that's frustrating, and I don't have any issue with the people who are or were, I think, because I don't think anybody cares the same way now, and the glitches now are not powerful in the same way they used to be. But I don't have an issue with anybody who's frustrated by that.
Yeah, I can see that point of view, right? Where they say that even any kind of cheating, even glitches, are bad.
Yeah.
I think, though, that it's a little bit more complicated than that. Than just that, I mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there we go. I think that's sort of our... we got a little bit far away from have we hacked before, but that's have we hacked and what our opinions on hacking are. So have we hacked? No. What is our opinions on hacking? It's all right as long as you're not negatively impacting other people's enjoyment of the game. So, like, I know in, like, multiplayer games like shooters and whatever, when people can hack, it often really negatively impacts the experience for other people, right? It makes it harder for somebody else to enjoy it when you are experiencing skills that are not your own, essentially, right? When you're doing things to a level that you would not be able to if you were playing legitimately.
And it looks like we got another question from Ostreef.
Yeah. So the second question from the same person is account sharing allowed? Me and my friend share an account to play online. And then in brackets, we don't hack. It's all legit.
Yeah, so part of me wonders, for the number of people that have been using the glitch that requires
being signed into two devices at once,
one account on two devices, I wonder if the algorithms change, because I definitely remember, it's hard to forget that we did have one of our original accounts suspended because inadvertently we'd forgotten to log out of it from one device when we logged into it on another device.
Yeah, because when online multiplayer first came out, there was also a thing where you could duplicate accounts.
Yeah.
And
I think that still works.
Does it still work? I'm not 100% sure. Okay. But yeah, so there was sort of all that stuff, and the way that they got tied together and banning one would ban the others. There's definitely some stuff in online and being signed in that we don't entirely understand.
Right.
Just because it is not sort of a phenomenon that you can examine the same way.
Right.
So is it allowed? Probably not. I bet somewhere in the
terms of service?
Terms of service, it says it's not.
Is it enforced?
Is it? Yeah.
Probably not.
Will you run into issues if you're both playing online multiplayer at the same time? Possibly. We did in the past. Hasn't been tested anywhere near recently, so we couldn't tell you if that's dangerous or not. From our personal experience, I would be cautious, and I would only have one or the other playing online at any given time. Yeah. But if it's not being punished, then essentially it's allowed, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's sort of, it's definitely not endorsed, but is it allowed? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to talk about the meaning of the word allowed. If it's not if there's no consequence, then basically, yeah.
Yeah. Is it directly violating the terms of service? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not.
Possibly. It didn't used to be allowed, and it probably is violating terms of service, but it's clearly allowed now.
Or, well, we don't know if it's clearly allowed now. They're asking about it. They might just not have ever been playing online at the same time and might get banned one day.
No,
we don't know.
I'm basing it on the people that are using the glitch to get power credits and spending it. So the number of people who aren't complaining that they got banned and are still doing it and saying that they're doing it, I don't know. Sample size of maybe a handful of people.
Yeah, so we don't have the data for that one. Is I guess
we won't be collecting it.
Long and short of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't plan on it.
So there we go. Our next comment comes from Nami, Nami.
Yeah.
As always, let us know in the comments how your name's pronounced if you want us to pronounce it correctly going forward, or just to learn how your name is pronounced, because we're happy to learn.
Yeah, especially the language of origin.
Yeah.
I'm really curious.
And this comment was from the recap that you did solo, I believe.
Was it the recap or
Or
was it
the
even
play
the
video? One of
play
the
video?
two.
Maybe it was last week's video.
I forget which one. That's
Yeah.
okay. It was from one of the ones you did solo.
Yeah.
And so this comment is unambiguously directed at you.
So I'm
And
one
it
of the
reads-
olds.
It reads
Yeah.
as follows: Your voice is an ASMR godsend.
So this is what's funny to me. I'm an old, so I'm not sure. You're going to explain this to me. What does
Yeah.
that actually mean?
I think I've explained to you ASMR already
So
on the podcast.
I don't know what it stands. I can't remember what it stands for.
I
know it's the idea
know
that it's supposed to
exactly
be sounds that are
what
pleasing.
it stands for. I believe it's either autosensory meridian response or auditory sensory meridian response. One of the two. And
Is
what,
it a real thing?
It's sort of. Okay, I know a little bit of the history of it. I don't actually consume any ASMR, but I think I've listened to like a podcast on it, maybe like an episode of Reply All, which is a great podcast, or maybe it probably would have been Reply All. But so ASMR is basically that sensation you get that's almost tickling adjacent from audio. So the light crinkling of paper, somebody whispering into your ear, maybe stuff like that, where it's that sort of feeling of like tingles like on the back of your neck or your spine. And some people like it, and some people don't. And
Oh, you mean you can get that feeling and dislike it?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, so
I
because
think this is sort of like the skin crawling version of that, right? Where you just sort of feel like a little uneasy.
I think I'd always thought that the ASMR in some way was that it was pleasing.
I think it's supposed to be good, but I think some people also listen to stuff that maybe they're not maybe it's only ASMR if it's good, and some people listen to it and just don't like it. I don't know, because it might just be the positive experience of that sort of stimulus, right?
Okay.
But I don't actually know, and so it's not like a science thing. It was made up by somebody online. Like the term was coined by somebody online. I think one of the words in this was supposed to make it was called ASMR because it makes it sound more scientific, but the description of the feeling was almost sexual in origin. And I know one of the words picked out, I don't remember, that's in whatever thing I listened to where I learned about it. I don't remember which word it was, and I think it might be like something that they looked up like synonyms for or whatever, so it's not actually like a great phrase holistically, but it's not scientific. I think it's a real response that people get. I don't know if it's been studied after the fact. I know the initial creation of it, but it's also showed up in like my psych textbooks.
Really?
I've seen ASMR in my psych textbooks. Yeah, that as a term. It was one of it was a bolded term, so I had to write it down in my notes. And so it's it's a real thing. It's definitely a real phenomenon. I don't know how much it's been studied. I don't know how sort of well cited it was in my textbook. I should have looked at and seen if there was any citation, followed the citation if there was for that. But it's a real thing enough that I have read it in a psych textbook in university.
Okay.
So that's what I can tell you about it. And I know there are like ASMR like channels. Again, I haven't listened to any of it. Like I've listened to, I think in passing, like learning about what it was, clicking on a video, but the videos are all really long, and they're all just like dentist office simulations or whatever.
So when you say videos are long, I'm watching these videos for training at work, and they are so long and tedious that I've been falling asleep at my desk watching them. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, and so I think maybe the closest experience that you might have to having felt that is like when somebody is using an electric razor and shaves their head. That sort of when it goes near your ears and sort of that tingling sensation on the back of your neck. I don't know if you get that, right?
I don't.
But it's like the heebie-jeebies adjacent, but it's like getting the heebie-jeebies but good is sort of the best way that I can. The problem is you're sort of asking the wrong person, right? Because I think you'd have to ask somebody
like goosebumps
within the community. It's sort of like goosebumps. It's like positive goosebumps caused by sound.
Okay, all right.
As far as I'm aware. And so there's a lot of I know one of the things that they have for it is like binaural microphones.
Right.
So they can do left or right division, and they'll have like a simulated like silicone human head with like ears on it with the microphone pickup, so that they can basically use the working space of an actual person's head to like make noise around it, so that they can more accurately create the audio experience for you.
Right.
Yeah, so there's like YouTubers,
so
and they'll like, I think they crinkle a lot of paper, they do stuff with brushes. I heard I had a friend who said they do this like a clicking noise with their mouth.
Right.
I don't know what clicking noise it is. I don't know if it's like or something like that, but that seems too loud and not ASMR-y to me.
Right.
So I've heard of a clicking noise. I don't know what specific clicking noise it is. Maybe it's just like, I don't know. No clue.
Okay, so I want to say thank you. It sounds like then this is potentially comment, so thank you for the compliment. But I gotta believe that part of it has to be that because we've been doing this for so long, that we're familiar to people, and they just are comforted by the sound of our voices. And if anything, I feel like your voice, because it's deeper.
Is my voice deeper than yours?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, I have no clue.
Didn't used to be. I think we crossed over that. We did an intersection maybe a
your
year
voice
or two
is still
back.
pretty deep though.
I guess so, but I feel, to me it feels like it's the bass that can give you that real goosebump sometimes, more so than other kind of sounds.
I think ASMR used in this context, in the context of this comment, is obviously because you're not doing the full ASMR experience.
Right.
Is probably just more of a compliment on the quality of your voice. I think it's become a stand-in for people with soothing voices that you would enjoy listening to. So in the context of this, unless, feel free to correct me if this is specifically triggering ASMR for you, but I believe that within the context of this, it's more just like, I like listening to your voice.
Yeah, no, listen, and I'm happy to take it at that kind of interpretation. I do feel though that I'm not gonna fool myself into thinking that somehow I have a voice a voice for pictures and a face for radio.
Yeah,
but
I was gonna say you've got a voice for radio and a face for radio.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, I'm pretty sure a lot of it just has to do with we've been doing it for so long. I think it's great that we've taken a lot of people along the ride with us for a few years now, so we're probably familiar.
Well, it's funny, when I did a panel with a friend, and when I started speaking to the mic, when we were talking, I was the moderator of the panel. So when I was like, hey, I think we're going to get started in a minute, maybe everyone take your seats, my friend leaned over to me and said, your voice got significantly more dulcet the second you leaned into the mic, which is, I think, a similar sort of comment. And I think, to some extent, both of us talk a little bit differently when we're filming a video and when we're speaking for the microphone. So, I was trying to tell my friends about the YouTube voice, and I literally had to sit in front of my mic to do it properly, because I'm like, because when I'm talking to my friends, I sound more like this, right? And I don't like, it's hard for me to talk like I normally do,
right, for
the mic, and it's hard for me to talk like I do for the mic to my friends. So I definitely sound different, and it's not in a conscious way anymore, right? So I don't know how I'm modulating my voice, but I definitely know that I sound a little bit different.
Right.
I think. Oh, we're out of video content.
That's it. That was the card.
So there we go. We ended just talking about ASMR for a really long time. We've actually got another question. Maybe we'll push this one to next week. What do you say?
From Steelier. That's a sneak peek. That's a, what do you call it?
Sneak preview? I don't know.
No, spoiler alert.
This is not really a spoiler. All right. So to finish up here, we'd like to thank all of our patrons, but I'd also like to give a quick shout out to my friend Eliza. She doesn't know what this channel is, but she asked for a shout out in the video, so I guess there you go. But we also have all of the people who support us on Patreon, which are maybe a little more important than just random people I know. So a huge thank you to Console Peasant, Edwin Felix, Console Peasant and Edwin Felix, who are supporting us at the highest last word tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, and Michael DeVries, who support us on the credited level, and Eddy G and Chris Wolff at the gratitude level. Thanks so much for your support. You were editing the grammar of it as I was trying to read it, and it really did me a loop.
I did you dirty there.
So thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Komoda!